Thank you all for being here for the first ever Travel and Mobility Forum by Mozio. I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about our venue before we continue, and then I'm going to give you guys kind of a mercifully short keynote presentation before we get into the panels. So just quick 30-second summary. We're at the Explorers Club right now, which has been around for about 100 years. It was originally, the building was originally owned by the Singer family of Singer Sewing. It was donated a couple times and ended up in the hands of the Explorers Club. Later today, we'll give you tours if you'd like. It has a very interesting history. Used to be full of hunting enthusiasts. Now is much more conservation-based. Teddy Roosevelt was an initial member, and it is a fascinating place with wonderful Instagram moments with polar bears. So please feel free to post at your heart's content and tag us. But yeah, I wanted to give you guys a little background about why we're all here today. So about 4 or 5 months ago, we were talking internally about how there was barely any conference that talks about what we want to talk about. All the travel conferences, maybe 1 out of every 10 would have a panel on ground transportation. And every mobility conference was mostly focused on B2G, i.e. Pitching governments. It was all about how public transit agencies and new technology could work together. And while that's very admirable and I enjoy all those conferences and go to them, there was not really a lot for our intersection of travel and mobility. We realized another kind of a split in the industry as well, which was there was a camp of traditionalists and then a camp of innovators. And the traditionalists, they were very focused on service. It was a lot of advanced reservation, car services. It was a lot of very high quality service and SLAs, but often were lagging in technology. The new guys were sometimes a little bit aggressive and didn't always follow all the laws, at the beginning at least, but were highly innovative. And we realized these people weren't speaking to each other. In addition, corporates and many of the major online travel agencies and airlines wanted to work with both of them. And they were signing individual deals with Uber, Lyft, and Via, and then having separate systems, often through Mozio, for advanced reservation ground transportation and more. And no one was tying all this together and no one was working together. In addition, and if you haven't got the gist of our keynote here, is the trends in the mobility and travel industry. So in addition, the mobility use case in travel has started to heat up. So you see every car rental company coming out with something. So we're honored that actually Mozio powers Hertz Drive U, which is their limousine service that they launched with Air France. But Sixt has launched My Driver quite aggressively and has added ride hailing. Europcar owns Brunel now, and Enterprise bought Deem. So almost everyone has figured out what is our new mobility way to compete with the Ubers and Lyfts of the world. And when there's not competition, there's sometimes collaboration. So many of those same car rental companies are making a killing off of renting their vehicles to Uber and Lyft drivers. In addition, there was a very high-profile integration about 4 months ago between Booking.com and Grab, and it was one of the first of its kind, a major online travel agency with a major rideshare partner. We thought it was a little odd internally since Booking.com, its biggest market is Europe, that they picked Grab, but Grab seems to be one of the most aggressive when it comes to kind of expanding and roaming agreements. And we see this continuing with more and more OTAs and more rideshare guys trying to collaborate together. But a really big part of the transformation that we saw in the last year is a travel use case arriving in mobility. So what I said before was a mobility use case in travel, meaning online travel agencies, airlines wanting to sell ground transportation. What we're starting to see is also the opposite. So we've kind of referred to this internally as the World War I trench warfare phase of rideshare expansion, meaning they're no longer trying to advance the battle lines, they're literally just sniping at each other across a massive trench. And the way we look at this is most of these guys, Uber has retreated from Russia, from China, from, I'm losing track, honestly, Southeast Asia, there are a lot of different places. But many of these guys are still figuring out, how do I service the travel use case for my local travelers? So this has led to a bunch of roaming agreements. So Grab and Kakao have linked up. And in addition to roaming agreements, different service types. So Lyft launched a car rental competitor, and every car rental stock went down by 4 or 5% the next day. But they're starting to recognize that they should be adding these other use cases outside of their core cities and outside of their core use cases. In addition to this, there's a huge rise of super apps. So the original super app was WeChat. In China, it's almost like the operating system of many Chinese consumers' phones with tons and tons of services. You can book your taxi on Didi through WeChat. This has started to expand across not just China with other competitors like Meituan, but also all around Southeast Asia and LATAM. Mozio's in discussions with many food delivery companies, many banking apps that every single food delivery banking app, rideshare company wants to add one of the others. So it's led to a huge interest in mobility from the perspective of payments, which is how do we get more people using our digital wallet, our credit card, let's provide them a bunch of services around it. And of course, continuing fragmentation. So, when we first started Mozio 9 years ago, I'd say a lot of the narrative when I pitched venture capitalists was, they'll just Uber there. That was often how we were dismissed when we talked about aggregating different forms of transportation. And luckily, we don't get that anymore. There's an entire industry, many of whom are gathered here, called Mobility as a Service, talking about combining different forms of transportation. And it's only getting better for us, worse fragmentation, but better for an aggregator, with different car companies starting to launch their own services. So we have My Taxi Free Now in the room. Today is going to be on a panel as well. That's a tie-up between Daimler and BMW. We know that Renault and Peugeot are starting to acquire assets in all these different spaces. There's a few that are thinking a little more long-term on a 5-year timetable, working on autonomous vehicles, and are planning on launching autonomous taxi companies in 3 to 5 years. So our view of the market is, give it another 3 to 5 years, you're going to see much more fragmentation, a lot more stratification along different price points, as well as scooter companies go up to car share, and the various rideshare companies go down to scooters, as they already have. Only got a couple more of these, but another big one is public transit integrations. So Uber tied up with Masabi. Today we have Masabi Passport here to talk about a lot of these different trends. Many of them are realizing that they need to become, at the very least, the urban transportation super app, if not a super app overall. You've probably heard over the last 3 to 4 months, again, coming back to that super app point, all about how Uber is launching Uber Staffing, Uber Health, all these different things that they're trying to add to their app. They're the only American player actually pursuing that kind of super app strategy in a raw form. But many other, Lyft has integrated public transit directions, and many of these guys are working on ticketing as well. So I think one of the biggest ones that we've heard about in the press recently is pressure to profitability. So my team forwarded me the one on the right here. E-scooter startup Lime shuts down in 12 markets, lays off around 100 this morning, and this is happening, every day. And this is led to, we think, a very interesting state in this industry, where previously many of the traditional car services who were kind of on their heels for a long time because there were billions and billions of subsidies pouring into those markets are now able to compete a little better. And so our first panel actually is with Emil, our head of supply, and a few of the traditional car service guys and one new car service player that are trying to compete in this world. And we, at Mozio, personally believe that the timing is right. For those of you who live in New York, a JFK to around here ride used to be $55. It's now around $85 on Uber. So people are starting to take taxis again. The car services, I think, have got a lot of pressure relieved from them. So there's an opportunity to actually have a real marketplace that is not completely altered by billions in subsidies, as there's public pressure to get profitable. And the last kind of trend we're seeing is that Mozio's been in the corporate travel world for a long time. We work with Amex GBT, who's thankfully one of our sponsors here today, as their ground transportation platform, GBT Ground. But we've been speaking to many top corporate clients for years, and in the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen the most amount of ground transportation RFPs come out. And we've talked about this, and there'll be another whole panel on this. There's an interesting, in the corporate travel world, there's an interesting way things work where everyone has corporate negotiated rates and in exchange for directing your business to one car service and not the other. And in many cases, Lyft and Uber and all these guys tried corporate negotiated rates, tried giving a 2% discount, only to find that the travel manager wasn't willing to say, use Uber, don't use Lyft, or vice versa. And no additional traffic came from it. So they had no sense of control. And what Mozio has been saying for a while is you can't negotiate a deal and say we're going to refer traffic in one direction if you don't actually have the power to turn one off and turn another one on. So I think we think a lot of corporates seem to realize this now, are putting out RFPs for more comprehensive ground solutions. And the trend seems to be to try to figure out a way to control this market in the same way you can turn on and off American Airlines and Delta on Concur. What is the ground equivalent? So these 9 trends are why we decided to start this conference. We realized no one was kind of discussing this market. And it was only growing. The amount of players was only growing. The amount of intersection was only growing. The amount of use cases were only growing. So we are planning on actually throwing another 3 of these this year. We're going to do one in Europe, one in LATAM, and one in Southeast Asia. So would love to have you guys participate in those ones as well, assuming you enjoyed today's content. So quick thank you to our sponsors. So I mentioned already Amex GBT. Roxa is going to be on a panel later today over there. Thank you so much to Amex for sponsoring today. Also, a big thank you to JetBlue Technology Ventures. So Raj is there in the back. He'll be moderating our panel on the Z-axis, which has the CEOs of Blade and Voom and the head of I think public policy at Joby Aviation. Shameless plug, JetBlue Ventures is one of our first backers at Mozio and has been an incredibly supportive partner since then. Oh, whoops. Okay, cool. Sorry. I don't know how that got in there. So last shameless plug is on who we are. So I think since most of you guys are here, you have at least somewhat of a semblance of what Mozio does. So we're a leading ground transportation aggregator. We're about 9 years old, 75 employees, and we have leading deals with airline, hotel, online travel agency, and TMC clients, and more. So I already mentioned JetBlue. I mentioned Amex GBT. Another one of our investors, who's also in the room somewhere here, is Carlson Wagonlit. And we do a lot of business with a lot of the major players around the world. Here's a quick, 20-second overview here. We have on-demand integrations, a single source booking API that's integrated into sites like Despegar and Agoda, a white label booking platform that's used by about 75 partners around the world. And our own mobile ticketing solution, we actually run Toronto's public transit ticketing for their Go Transit commuter rail. And our own mobile SDK and corporate integration. So the mobile SDK is being piloted by Kiwi and by Klook. And what that means is right next to hotels, car rentals, and flights, they're going to be inserting a rides tab that when you click on that tab, that is completely run by us. And last but not least, those corporate integrations, Amex GBT being the crown jewel of them. So quick overview of our schedule. We've got a great morning panel here. A couple panels, excuse me. Our head of supply, Emil, is going to be discussing the future of car service. I already kind of elaborated on that one, so I won't belabor the point. Then we've got another one at 12 on ride sharing corporate. So really discussing duty of care versus kind of cost and convenience. So I think most people in this room are very well aware of the debate around how rideshare guys employ their drivers. And what does that mean for corporates and liability? We're going to have Lyft and a few other partners on the stage discussing that. And then last, before we go to lunch, and it's a little bit of a late lunch, so my apologies, we are having a panel on mobility as a service. So how does public transit, scooters, and bikes factor into all this? So I'll be moderating that, and we've got Masabi, Uber, and Passport, I think, are our panelists for that. The afternoon, we've got Raj moderating a wonderful panel. I mentioned that already, the CEOs of Blade, Voom, and then Joby Aviation, TMCs and OBTs. How are these ground transportation guys factored into the major corporate travel players? How are they making sure that they're not just getting cut out and people are going straight to Uber and Lyft? And then 2 more panels. One about trends abroad. So we've got Free Now, who's here, and they've owned Captain, formerly Chauffeur Privé, My Taxi, formerly Halo. We were out to dinner with them last night joking about the ridiculous rebrands they've had over the last few years. They have about 17 different brands that are now consolidating into one, Free Now. And we also have iGo or AutoCab. And the last panel is by Flixbus. About long-distance mobility, and it also includes Wanderoo and Rally. So super excited, and we have a great cocktail hours. Actually, we're going to go till 8:30, and we've got some liquor sponsors as well, including a moonshine company and some really boutique stuff. So very local to New York. So keeping with our theme of being a global business, but a very local touch. So there you go. I want to say one last thing. Before we move on to the panel, I just want to introduce our team. So I obviously am at the top left, but we've got Emre. If everyone could raise their hand just to show who they are. Yeah, so there's 4 in the back there, Emre, Emil, Anna, and JJ. So if you would like to talk to us about anything at any point today, just find one of us. And then Nicole and Belu is off making sure today runs correctly, but that's what she looks like. So anyways, without further ado, I'd like to call up Emil and the first 3 panelists of today, and please give them a round of applause. And yeah, welcome. We're gonna have Emil with one microphone and you guys passing around the other, so sorry about that.
Yeah. Testing?